what's going on? Jeff Ratcliffe here. And, one of the hottest topics of the offseason, the biggest debates, if you will, is what the heck is going on with Todd Gurley? I mean, last year, this guy was shot out of an absolute cannon to start the season, the number one fantasy running back by far over the first 9 weeks of the season. And, of course, he was the number one fantasy running back in 2017 as well. But then things started to unravel. I mean, we had a late bye week for the Rams in Week 12. Week 13, he was fine, but then Week 14, he put up a fantasy dud. Week 15, maybe not the best statistical day, though he did score 2 touchdowns. And then Week 16, he wasn't even in the lineup. And if you were a Todd Gurley owner last year, you had to think, I'm in the driver's seat. I'm going to win my fantasy championship. And then in Week 16, you had to watch C.J. Anderson go for over 160 yards and a touchdown on the ground. If you didn't pick him up, that absolutely stings. So this was a killer for fantasy purposes. And then we saw in the playoffs as well, you may not have been in playoff leagues, but Todd Gurley struggled for a good chunk of the playoffs. He was basically non-existent in the Super Bowl, and maybe that's a reason why the Rams lost that game. We don't know. I mean, you have to figure that is part of the equation. Regardless, what do we do now? Because, hey, if Todd Gurley was fully healthy and Todd Gurley was getting the Todd Gurley workload that he saw earlier in the season last year, that was 24.5 touches a game over those first 9 weeks. He's the number one guy. He's the number one overall pick, no questions asked. But of course, that's not the case. And, the NFL teams, they lie to us. We know that. And we've heard over and over and over again from the Rams, hey, he's all right. It's not that bad. These aren't the droids you're looking for. But the reality is that, hey, at the NFL draft, these teams can't lie. They show their hand. They tell their truth. And the Rams drafted a running back on day 2 in Henderson, who's an exciting running back. So does this mean that Henderson's going to take over for Gurley and Gurley's days as a featured back in the NFL are over? I don't think so. I think we have to pump the brakes just a little bit on that. And there's varying degrees of takes out there. Some are conservative, some are aggressive. Some people are basically writing off Todd Gurley altogether at this point. I don't think we should go that far because we have to look at all of the factors in play. So first and foremost, is Todd Gurley old? No. Old for a running back is 27. Todd Gurley is 24. So he is not old. Yes, he has a lot of wear and tear on those tires, but he's not old just yet for the position. The Rams last year drafted on the 3rd day of the NFL draft, John Kelly. There was some hype about him in the preseason, but ultimately he didn't pan out. So what happened with Gurley is he ended up having to see roughly 86% of the team's touches. That's way too much. And obviously, any running back in the NFL, doesn't matter who you are, the more touches you have, the more likely you're going to wear down at the end of the season. And I have to state the obvious here. The Rams, the Patriots, the Eagles, the Bears, whoever it is, they don't care about your fantasy team. I mean, it is the obvious. They don't care if Todd Gurley's the number one fantasy running back. They care about that one thing, that's ultimately hoisting the Lombardi Trophy in early February. So again, Todd Gurley key here for this Rams team. He really wasn't able to help them out that much in that process. So let's put it all together. Henderson, who does he have similarities with? Todd Gurley? Not necessarily. But actually does have some similarities to John Kelly. Now, he's a much more explosive player than Kelly. Obviously, his draft stock was higher. But in terms of what he could do in an offense, he could come in and give you 7 to 10 touches that are quality touches with explosive upside that Kelly just wasn't able to do, and really nobody else on the Rams was able to do last year. So this allows you to reduce the touches that you're going to give Todd Gurley. You don't have to give him 24.5, 25 touches a game. You can give him 18, which 18 is still a solid workload. It's not a bell cow workload. It's not 20 plus per game, but 18 a solid number. In fact, last year, only 11 running backs other than Gurley had more than 18 touches per game. And Gurley was incredibly efficient on a per touch basis. Now, Alvin Kamara is sort of the rock star. By the way, only 18.3 touches last year, but at 1.27 fantasy points per touch, Kamara is an absolute stud. That's super efficient. But Gurley was right there, 1.17 per touch, and he had 1.13 per touch in 2017. So this guy gets it done on an efficiency basis. So he doesn't necessarily need 25 touches volume to be an RB1 in fantasy. Now, that being said, if you put those numbers together, say you get Gurley 18 touches per game, which is under 300 for the season, he continues his efficiency rate, he could still easily be, like last year, that efficiency would have placed him as the number 7 fantasy running back. So is he the number 1? No. But is he a top 10 guy? Absolutely. And the thing is, this year in fantasy drafts, if you're a top 10 fantasy running back, you could very well go in the first round. You could, in 12-team leagues, see 10 running backs come off the board in the first round of your 12-team drafts. So Todd Gurley should be a back-end, at worst case scenario, back-end first-round pick. But I think the hate is going to go too far, and we're going to see Gurley end up being a pretty good value. If he falls to the second round, I would pounce. The risk reward that you get in that range with a guy like Todd Gurley is phenomenal. Now, that being said as well, Darrell Henderson's draft stock continues to go up, up, up. And where we really should be valuing him, if he's at 7 to 10 touches per game, yes, he has that explosive upside. But the reality is that, guys getting that few touches per game, unless they're PPR monsters, guys who can catch like 60 balls out of the backfield like Nyheim Hines did last year, then it's really tough for them to sniff RB2 production. They're more like RB3s or even beyond that, outside of the top 36. So when you put that together, and by the way, Henderson, I don't view him, and I don't think the Rams are going to view him as a guy who's going to catch 60-plus balls. He's more of a guy who's going to spell Gurley in both aspects of the game. So you think round about 25 catches, round about 30 catches, and 100-plus carries. That puts him essentially in that range of about 35 to 40 at running back, which means appropriate value on my board in a 12-team league for Darrell Henderson is an 8th-round pick. So you're scoring value potentially with Todd Gurley. Be greedy while others are fearful potentially there, and maybe letting somebody else reach and grab Darrell Henderson just a little early. Now, the thing about Henderson as well, we have to remember, he does have that premium handcuff value, but that's only if Gurley is in fact hurt. And the Rams, if they want to win a Super Bowl, Todd Gurley is going to have to be a big part of it. So Darrell Henderson in a complementary role will allow him to execute that. For us, for fantasy purposes, reading between the lines, we can reap the benefits. If you want to see where Todd Gurley ranks, where Darrell Henderson ranks in our PFF staff rankings, just head on over to ProFootballFocus.com. We have PPR, half-point PPR, standard, 2-quarterback. Where is Gurley in all of these? Where is Darrell Henderson? We have that for you at ProFootballFocus.com.